into the space that's going to be where the new hospital is built. Yes, so it's those kinds of things. One of the recommendations in the concept, and I'll speak to the hospital design in a minute, but one of the recommendations in the concept discussion with the architects is to be able to set our emergency department and outpatient clinics close together. So if there is an emergency, a disaster, we can then open the two departments and create one big section for emergencies. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. So it's not redefining how we manage emergencies, but it's about bringing it into the service that we will be providing. The last but not least is the electronic health information system. And again, those of us who come from the UK and the US understand the absolute necessity for it. Up until now, we've done our best with the paper that we use, and it's, again, a challenge. When a patient is seen at the health center, they've got health center notes. If they're seen inpatient in the ward, they've got inpatient notes. And then they go to casualty and they've got casualty notes. Because of the geographic spread, because of all sorts of reasons, it's difficult to get all of those things together. We can't give a patient his or her file to walk around with. So it's very, very difficult to get patients' information all together. Not only that, but when you want to access things like patient results, those aren't readily available because there's no information system, there's no computer access. And things are moving so quickly for us that I can see, and many of us can see, technology in the information system actually driving change and driving improvement in Montserrat. And why? It gives us telemedicine opportunities, and telemedicine, in my firm belief, telemedicine is going to be the way forward for Montserrat. And what's telemedicine? Telemedicine uses technology to train physicians, support physicians, and support patients remotely. And they're using it in several places, not just in the developing world, but in the developed world. So I've just recently had a conversation with a group in Airedale in the NHS, and they're actually providing telemedicine support to clinicians who work in quite remote areas, in places like Scotland, where they don't necessarily have a group, a core team to work within. And doctors, we like to work together. We don't seem that way, but in hospital medicine, we always work as a team. There's a consultant and there are juniors, and we always discuss. And sometimes it's very difficult when you are the only clinician to make those decisions. And what telemedicine does is that it creates a virtual community, and so clinicians in remote areas can access their colleagues and information. And if there's any group who require the support of the wider community, it's the clinicians here in Montserrat. So telemedicine can do that for us, and that's where we're heading. The other great thing about telemedicine, and the advancements are so rapid, and I've just come out of the diagnostics industry, so I'm really excited about these things. But simple things, that if someone takes a biopsy and they look at your cells on the slide, you can have one opinion for the person who's looking at the slide. Technology allows us to beam that information to clinicians anywhere in the world, and instantly you can have 4, 5, 6 second opinions right there and then. Same with x-rays. You can do an x-ray and you can beam it. It's on the computer, it's there, you put it in the cloud, you put it wherever you like, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 opinions right away. And that is really, really good for us. It is really good for us. So we don't necessarily need all the expertise on island. We will have expertise, more expertise than we know what to do with if we have telemedicine. So telemedicine is going to be useful for us, and the electronic medical information system is what's going to help. We're looking at 3 options right now, and over the next few weeks we should be making a decision and narrowing it down to 2, and then the final one. So those are the 7 work streams for the hospital project. it's a great project to be in right now, and it's unfortunate that we don't communicate, and the ministry hasn't communicated as well as we hope it will do in the future, that people will know that things are happening. And when people don't see the hospital, they're not despondent, they're not disheartened. You don't see the hospital, but there is so much going on that when the hospital does arrive, it will be a spectacular event. It really will be. So please don't be disheartened. The hospital will arrive 2017, I promise you. My contract will be up, so I will be here, and you can't hold me to that. But we will have the new hospital. And moving on to the new hospital, because everyone wants to know about the new hospital. So, there was a lot of conversation, and the press were all over the fact that we made a decision, a unilateral decision, the Ministry of Health, on the hospital design. That is incorrect. What we have done, the architects have come to us, we gave them some specifications as to what we'd like to see. And we said, give us some options in terms of a concept. And what they did is came to us with, we said we would like a flat hospital. There are no elevators on Montserrat, we don't want to be the first ones, give us a flat hospital. They hummed and hawed and they said, well, I'm not really quite sure, but we'll give you some options. So they went away, and not surprisingly, they came back with 3 options. A one-story, 2-story, and 3-story hospital. We looked at it as a board, and now this is not the design. This is just the concept. This is how many floors are you going to have, and potentially what will you have on each floor. This is not what the hospital is going to look like. This is just the concept. And when they presented the concept to us of 1, 2, and 3-story, when we debated, it was felt that a 3-story hospital would be the best choice. And I'll explain why. But first, let me make it clear. When we say 3 stories, again, people went into a mad panic. Oh, 3 stories, how you can go up 3 floors, you're next to the airport, and that's going to be a problem, and how are you going to get patients down? It's 3 floors. However, it's a ground floor, a lower level, and an upper level. So actually, the patient access areas are 2 levels, okay? There's the ground floor, and the inpatients are 1 floor up. So there should be no reason for panic, even if the 3 elevators we're going to have to put in, even if they all went down, we can still get our patients out. There's still ways to set up ramp systems down the stairs to get patients out. So people shouldn't worry too much. So 3 stories does not mean 3 stories above ground. Because the land slopes to the back, what you do is when you put a level at what we will consider the ground level, there's still that space down the back for the slope, so they do a cut and fill, and then they build a bit to the bottom and a bit to the top. So what we see here, I'm going to have to move away, I'm sorry. So what we see here, this is where the current road is. This is going to be the ground level, and you see this bit is the lower ground, and this top level is going to be the patient area. Two areas for patient access. And that's not very good, so we won't look at that. So what we're looking at here, and you won't be able to read it, but just to give you an idea, is the architects have said, this is how we will separate the building in order to give you the best possible orientation of your services to make things easy for yourselves and for patients. So the first one is the lower level to the far left, the middle is the ground level, and to the right is the top level. As I said, we debated this to some great degree. We spent 8 hours, the team and the architects and everyone, we spent 8 hours in a room deliberating whether we should go with option 1, 2, and 3. We then went away, thought about it for a week, and came back and still had some of the deliberations. So we thought long and hard about it, and it wasn't, again, on design, because it's not about design. It's about feasibility, practicality, and cost. So some of the advantages of this new build, and for us, the biggest advantage, was that it has a small footprint. And when I say small footprint, it means that the hospital, because it's stacked, doesn't take up a lot of room. What that allows us to do is, and I don't know how many of you really know the hospital, but from the ward building, there is the administrative building and then kitchens and all the way back. What we can then do is erect a wall, temporary wall, at the level of the admin building, demolish everything back of that, and that becomes almost a greenfield site. They will build the hospital on that footprint, and it means that our clinical services will continue once we build the hospital. Whereas if we'd gone with a 1 or 2 story, the 1-story hospital went from the current road all the way back to the rear boundary. That would have meant decanting, build, decant, build, decant, build, decant. And we all know, I hope there are no builders in here, but we all know how it goes with the builders. They say phase 1 will be done January, and then March, well, there was bad weather, etc., etc. This stops that from happening. It stops it from happening. It gets us straight to the point, build our hospital, get in, get out. It also allows us to then have the space in the front to do some very important things. So we have a clear public main access way, but it gives us a parking area at the very front. And what it also does, it allows us to have a proper emergency vehicle access to our hospital. So the cars and the drop-offs and the pickups and the fathers picking up the mummies and the newborns, they stay well out of the way of the ambulance access. It gives us a lot of parking in the front, and then there are many, many things we can do that space. I just spoke to the chief fire officer, and he said to me, "Are you going to put a helipad there?" And I thought, well, you know what? That actually, all we need to do is paint a big H, and we've got that. So, you know, we're thinking of different ways to use this in the future, but it gives us a lovely space. It takes us off the road, and we then have that movement, that clear movement around the building. Also, horizontal time. When we looked at, in an emergency situation, let's say, we have 6 doctors. On the weekend, we might have 2 doctors at the hospital at any period of time, maximum. If a hospital is in A&E, which is the front of the building, and we used a 1-floor design, and the patients would have been at the back of the building, if a doctor needed to get from the front in an emergency to the back, they would need to train with Usain Bolt to get there in a reasonable period of time. Just think if you had to run from the current road, because that hospital would have been next to the road, from the current road all the way back to the back boundary. It just wasn't, it didn't make any sense. To wheel patients back and forth, it just didn't make sense. Right now, we've got shorter horizontal travel time. If a clinician is downstairs in A&E, they need to see a patient, they go up 1 floor, and there they are, on the wards. In order to get food from one part of the hospital to the other, you don't have people pushing trolleys all over the place. They get in the lift, they get up around the corner, they are where they're supposed to be. There's really good flow separation. And flow separation was an interesting concept that we'd not thought of or even heard of before. But these architects, they've done this work for quite some time. And what they said is, in designing hospitals, the modern thing to do is to design the flow where you have front of the house and back of the house. And what they mean is, anything that's patient-related and visitors need to happen in front of the house. house. And anything that does not need to be in the public eye, so let's say you're wheeling a patient from the ward to theatre, or you're wheeling the food trolley from the kitchens to the ward, that should not coincide with visitors. So front of the house, back of the house circulation. And the optimal is to have front of the house never crossing back of the house. In the first two designs, front of the house crossed back of the house. Not very often, once or twice, but in this design, it does not cross. So even the elevators, the porters can bring a patient up on the lift from A&E upstairs, and there is a back circulation to get from the elevator, which is a dedicated lift, to the ward. They never go through the main area where visitors are coming. Very, very important. In addition to that, the separation is great level to level. So on the ground, the lower level is the maintenance level. Patients should not need to go down there. The kitchens and the maintenance and all of that needs to go on the lower ground. The ground floor would be fit for things that outpatients and potential inpatients would come through. Outpatient clinic, emergency, labs, x-rays, those kinds of things. And then the top floor would be your operating theatres and your ward. This is really, really useful for us in the event of an outbreak, because you can then seal off your top floor with your truly ill people, and there is no throughput. There aren't these dirty feet going through. You can control access to the ward, so you can put your hand sanitizers, you can put your mats down to make sure people's shoes are clean, they wipe their hands, etc. It helps us to quarantine an area of the hospital that needs to stay clean. So that's another really significant benefit to have a 3-story building as opposed to a 2 or 1 story. The smaller footprint also helps with roof maintenance. You have a smaller roof, and therefore the roof is easier to maintain, it's less costly. And as I said, mechanical services on the lower level. So in event of hurricanes or anything, your mechanical services are well preserved under the building, and your hospital can keep running. You have access to those, and they are safe. So that's where we are with the hospital project. But what next? Concept. We're at the concept stage, and as I said, this is just the concept. The architects will be back on island in, not next week, the following week, and we will be discussing the design. So they've sent us a pre-design, and we're looking at the document. It's a huge document, 157 pages, very light reading. And at that point, we will discuss what the design will look like. And that's when we get into the aesthetics of it. And we start looking at where the windows should go, and patients should be able to see the sea or this or that. That's when we get into that. So please rest assured, the hospital has not been designed. The concept has been agreed, and it's been agreed on very, very, very sound reasons. And it's not because the CMO says, it's because we all got together as a team and decided this was best for Montserrat. So, with that said, I will close there, but thank you very, very much for listening. We will continue to do our very, very, very best to make the system as good as anywhere else in the world for Montserrat. Thank you.
Well, for somebody who said that she doesn't like microphones, I think she did very well. Give her another big round of applause. Dr. Tracy has to rush off, but I think we might have time for just a couple of questions. Yes, Shirley.
As regards financing, has any attempt been made to check with smaller British islands, overseas territories such as St. Helena, to see how they manage the cost of their...
Absolutely, absolutely. Those are the conversations that are being had, how other people are doing it. And that's one of the great things about having Mr. Gilchrist, because he started this in Grenada for one of their hospitals, went to the Sangre Grande Hospital in Trinidad, which is, is a small hospital. So he understands what needs to be done, the conversations that need to be held. And so, yes, we are doing that.
Another question.
Yes, sure.
I'm thinking of the little old woman. I mean, I will be there soon. But a little old woman going to the hospital currently, and the doctor, because there's no computer system for him to put in her name and find out, say a visiting doctor who doesn't know the people, and a doctor has asked me what medications I am taking. So I have to walk around with the medications and the dosages in my handbag. But the little old woman who goes in, how is she to remember what is she taking? There should be a computer system.
That's an issue, and what we need to do is communicate better with our pharmacy. Because many people, the little old lady would have access to medications from the pharmacy. The pharmacy is just in the next building.
Okay.
What our doctors need to start doing is communicating with pharmacy. So when little old lady comes in, and even if she comes in with her medication, I believe that's a conversation to be had. And actually, it's a good question, because we recently, last year actually, we had the OECS PPS, the Pharmacy Procurement Group. They did a review of prescribing in the elderly. And what they've said is they believe the pharmacist should be more involved in the prescribing of drugs for the elderly, and to be able to review the drugs, because I'm not saying doctors are lazy, but we tend to get set in our own way. When you come back, we give you a repeat prescription, and somebody really needs to start analyzing that in a way that's to your benefit. And so the pharmacy moving forward is going to be more involved to then allocate the right medications, giving doctors advice, and we need to have more of a conversation with them.
Just one quick question, which I'm sure you've made